I think we'll give it just a minute or two, Jeff, before we get started, just to let everyone log on to today's session.
Yeah, I heard what you were saying earlier about starting about 5 after or ending sessions 5 minutes early. Give people that time to get from room to room.
The struggle's real, even in the virtual world.
The struggle's real. I've got about 4 minutes of content. Is that it? Is that good enough? 2 slides.
Maybe this should just be the networking session.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, let's just give it 2 more minutes, if that's all right.
Sure. Bill, are you able to see me and the slide side by side?
Your screen is being shared and I can see you.
But you can't see my slides?
No, I can only see your...
Can you see my slides?
No, I only see the view of one screenshot, one slide.
You don't see my slides?
I do, when you toggle between them, yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're okay then?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, we just can't see me then.
I can see you.
And you can see my slides?
And I can see your slide.
Side by side?
Oh my God. Did you start drinking now or did you wait? Are you going to wait till after? I see a Scotch aficionado on the call, so.
Nice.
So it's 4 minutes after. I think what we'll do is just give everyone just a minute. I think, it's kind of funny doing this. We in the live conferences, we find ourselves running from session to session, grabbing coffee, water, cookies, all the things in between, and shaking hands and saying hi to people. And the reality is there's a bit of struggle with this, right? Of getting to the sessions on time, and because there's a wealth of information and people are, have other things that are going on in their day. So I just, really want to appreciate and value everyone's time, but, give people a second as well. So, for the sake of everyone who's on, every other people may pop on, but let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, I just want to thank everyone for today for joining the Cardenas Connect Summit. I think it's been fairly successful. We've had a wealth of information that's been shared, and ultimately, I'm really looking forward to Jeff Smagacz, sharing his information as a keynote speaker here to wrap up the 2-day event. But again, I just really want to thank all the participants. I want to thank all the hosts, all the panelists for their time today. And I hope everyone walks away with a plethora of knowledge. It gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce Jeff Smagacz, only because, we've really developed a very solid relationship and partnership with Marsh, with Jeff and his team. I think several of you got to sit in on the panel with Sue Denicky, and just the knowledge and experience that comes from Jeff and his team. And just to give you an idea, Jeff is responsible for the global ergonomics. He's the global ergonomics practice leader and senior vice president at Marsh Risk Consulting and Workforce Strategies. Jeff leverages his vast human factors and ergonomic skill set with clients to deploy initiatives that align business requirements with safe, efficient, and sustainable processes. The strategic partnership he develops routinely deliver reduction in injuries, and subsequent financial impact. And Jeff, there was a lot of questions in different sessions today about MSD and MSK, and I know it's so early, and we talked about these being cumulative traumas and cumulative injuries, that these may not have surfaced. So if you're able to touch base on some of that, I think it would absolutely be fantastic. Before Jeff joined Marsh, he founded his own company, Risk Management Group, and as an ergonomics consulting group, they developed industry-leading ergonomic risk assessment tools and strategies to manage risk exposures. And I think that's extremely important because Jeff is not only a friend, but he's someone that I bounce a lot of business ideas and strategies off of, including the development of our industrial course and program, Healthy Working Pro, that Jeff and his team have been very instrumental on the industrial program, not just in the approach of it and the simplicity of it, but also bringing it all together on an enterprise level of being able to look at risk from the forest all the way down to the trees. So I don't want to take up too much of Jeff's time because there's a lot that I could continue to tell you about with Jeff, including the fact that Jeff played volleyball at University of Michigan, and I believe he's standing up right now. So maybe at the end of his session, he can tell us all about that as well. But without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jeff Smagacz to the Connect Summit and considerations for the flexible workforce. So Jeff, the floor is all yours.
Hey, thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. Great reading off that sheet. I appreciate some of that.
You're welcome.
Hey, I do want to say thank you. First and foremost, thank you to Cardinus and the Connect Summit that you had assembled over the past couple of days. Bill, just echoing what you said, I mean, the combination of excellent speakers, the great topics, the range of information has all been fantastically put together. So thank you, and thank Demetria Spear, John Abbott. I know Stephen Smith, Andy Hawks, yourself, and others I know I'm forgetting, but thank you for coordinating this. I am the final speaker here in this Connect Summit, so I hope that you'll extract some information here. What I'm going to do is kind of present some factual stats, talk about some trends, and really poke some ideas out to you to really kind of consider as you're working towards the flexible workspace. I won't provide a lot of very specific details, but overall kind of themes that I hope that will resonate within you and your organization. I'd be happy to take some questions after as well. We know that the current state we're in right now, I think we all know it because we experience it, but the pandemic has accelerated a company's transition to this thing called a flexible work experience for employees. And there's really a couple of things that have come out of this current state that we're experiencing. Number one is the employer's perspectives and the employee's expectations are going to continue to evolve in this space. So I just want you to know that nothing is set in stone right now, that things are going to continue to be dynamic and things are going to continue to change and evolve in this space. So there's no right answer. That's the first one. The second one is the flexible experience of the future will not mirror the flexible experience of the past. And some would say that we're in somewhat of uncharted territory right now, and that we're trying to kind of figure out our way going forward. And my point here is that's okay. The third is that we will go away from this extreme social isolation. And if we think more about employees, is we as employees and your employees will have more ability to flex between remote and in an office working. So there will be opportunities that are present and available to our staff, our teams, our colleagues. And the last one there is that employers will need to be conscious of decisions as we go forward. There will be a balance, there will be a struggle, there will be some tensions between the short-term decisions that are made to support flexible working, as well as the long-term programs, the sustainable programs that we'll need for an organization to thrive going forward. So this is kind of the current state of where we're at. And if we think a little bigger and deeper, we want to get to what does our future workforce look like as we move into this thing called a future state. Um, Employees are becoming more employee centric. And this is different than previous years and decades. When I talk about employee centric, that means making people kind of a bigger, more central piece of this puzzle. The prior experience is that we would build buildings and then we would populate with people. Well, today we've changed that model, or we're changing that model such that we're looking for the right talent and skill sets. Then we're figuring out where to put those people. So it's flipped upside down a little bit, and some important questions are really starting to kind of filter out. What will the future workforce look like? How can business leaders' decisions find the balance between what the employees need, as well as what the employers are willing to give, such that we can all be harmonious? And what will the business model look like? How and where will we work? So as we kind of explore this in the next 4 hours, maybe 5 hours, I'll try and cut it down. I think what's vital and important is to understand the concept of agile and flexible. We use these words interchangeably. We talk about people being agile and companies being flexible, but there are some very strong distinction between these definitions. And I want to kind of share them a little bit with you. So first and foremost is when we think agile. Agile is company centric. Agile is what the company is willing to do. Agile is what the company is trying to do to bring people together, to connect processes, to look at technology, to look at how is the most appropriate, an effective way to basically run a business, to carry out a task, to finish a project, to generate revenue, to launch a new product. But Agile is really this company centric initiative as to the what, the why, the how, and the when. So taking that into consideration, that's the big picture. Now, if we look at flexible is more employee centric. So flexible, this empowers employees with the time. It gives them choices. When do I want to start and stop work? How long is my work day? Where's the work-life balance that I'm trying to achieve? And what we find out here is that we want the benefits to extend down to the employees such that they can have great safety, reduce stress, improve job satisfaction, and ultimately less turnover. So we see that they're working together, but at the same time, they can really kind of butt heads against one another. So I want to kind of develop each one of these over the next few slides and help us understand from a company perspective, why are they pursuing Agile post-pandemic? And really, why are employees trying to embrace flexible? So what's driving Agile from the company perspective? And we look at company perspective here is we see headlines. Employees are quitting instead of giving up working from home. People have had a taste of freedom in some ways. 71% of people in a recent survey said that they do not want to go back to the office. They really like the freedoms that they're having, and they're willing to quit a job and take on another job if they can't get that experience. So this is driving companies to be more agile. Employees are speaking up. There's another angle to what's driving Agile from the company perspective. Well, it's exhaustion and burnout. The data is telling us, and the trends are telling us that people, they're getting frustrated, that they're spending more time doing things that they don't want to do or don't like doing or have to do in a large exposure. For example, we see 148%. The number of meetings hosted in Microsoft Teams more than doubled from February of last year to February of this year. That number was even normalized in a Microsoft Trend Index. What's more impressive to me is that email communication to commercial and education customers, commercial companies like us, and education companies like universities, that they also increased 226% in their email communication. What I find most impressive is that the number of email communication went from 12.4 billion communications to 40.6 billion communications over the past 18 months. So we're seeing these significant increases of exhaustion and burnout as the employees are working. We're also seeing a third issue that's driving agile work from the company perspective. Workforce exhaustion is the the fourth leading threat identified by human resource and risk managers within an organization. However, but it's the 13th place priority on how the company is going to address it. So it's a fourth biggest issue, but yet it's not getting a lot of press. They're trying to reshuffle that deck and make sure that we are addressing it quicker because exhaustion impacts fatigue, exhaustion impacts the work life balance, exhaustion leads to higher employee dissatisfaction, and it lowers productivity and ultimately increases turnover. So companies realize they need to retain the great talent that they have. There's two other aspects to what's driving the company centric agility. The second one is the pandemic, as we're aware, it caused a notable shift towards remote work. And as such, it removed the geographic barriers to getting talent. In a projected post-pandemic world, we're going to have a significant number of people that'll be working remotely or hybrid. So over 60%. Therefore, we're finding that companies have the ability now to hire for skill, not just hire for zip code. Hire for skill, not just for zip code. And that's really important on how an organization can grow. The last agility driver that we're seeing driven by this employer centric approach is they're trying to preserve culture. Leaders are making decisions every day on your future and my future, trying to figure out what's going to preserve and improve company culture. There's different sources out there. This data, although it's 6 months old, 7 months old, it still shows today that companies are experimenting with how much flexibility and agility they're willing to commit to maintain and grow that company culture. So while companies are trying to develop these strategies and approaches for agility, what's the flexibility angle that employees want to embrace? Well, it's the same, the burnout and exhaustion. The same thing the company is understanding. We go back to the employee and the associates are saying that, hey, I am exhausted. On average, people are spending 3 hours extra time in the US every day working from home. And when we accrue that over a week, a month, a year, that becomes significant. According to the Microsoft Trend Index, they looked at this survey that 54% of the folks they surveyed, the people felt overworked. 40% felt exhausted. And when normalized, Teams meetings are longer today than they were over a year ago. So we're seeing that everything is creeping up into this exhaustion. Big topic for both groups. I do want to read something to you quickly, which I think really kind of is a great summary of burnout and exhaustion. According to Dr. Mary Donahue, she's from the Digital Wellness Center And she says, the exhaustion that we're feeling can be blamed on the speed and the urgency of virtual work. In person communications give our brain a chance to assess things like tone and social cues and body language to make a meaning. But technology creates digital static, the gap between what you try to communicate online and what the person receiving the message understands. As the digital static increases, so does employee fatigue, employee anxiety, and employee burnout rates, while motivation and engagement decline. I think Dr. Donahue had a perfect summary. But what else is driving the employee flexibility? Well, they're finding benefits, they're finding perks to not having to go into an office. According to a study just a few months ago, more than a third of the respondents said that they're saving at least $5,000 annually by working remotely. In addition, they don't have to commute. That's a big perk of flexibility. They feel safer because there's less COVID exposure from fellow colleagues and the people they come in contact going to work. They're able to have lower anxiety because they're not away from their people, their pets, and their family. And also, they're able to handle some childcare responsibilities, which have been difficult in the past year and a half. So that's driving employee flexibility. But I do want to talk about one specific group, and this is Gen Z. And we're finding that this group, Generation Z, is becoming and will become our largest employee population within about 8 years. And these are people between 18 and 25. And majority of them said that currently during the pandemic and slightly after the pandemic, they feel like they're merely surviving or struggling. Well, this is important because they're our next generation of work. They're the ones that bring innovation. They're a large group that bring really kind of focus and growth to an organization. And right now, they're feeling isolated and demotivated. Now, Gen Z reported more difficulty feeling engaged or excited about work, getting in a word during meetings, and bringing ideas to the table. But one thing we have to understand about this Gen Z group is that they're highly socialized from birth within play groups all the way to soccer teams and beyond. This is the most highly social group that we have. And so it's if we see difficulty with them, it's going to affect an organization going forward. They also generally are early in their career and don't have the money to really have a proper workplace at home. So I'm sharing some of this information to you because we have an intersection, the intersection that's occurring between what the company centric is looking towards, as well as what the employee centric is looking for. We have agility and flexibility that are coming together, and they're creating what's called hybrid work. In hybrid work, really, I want to share with you what's called the four box model. We're trying to develop the best of both worlds. What will help a company grow in all of the things I mentioned previously? What will actually happen and really support the employees going forward? So, kind of ask yourself a few questions. What's the right workforce model for your company? And what does your ideal workforce breakdown look like? So, this four box model here, we have some extremes. In the bottom left, we have on campus. So, there will be people that go back to the office, they go back to their campus 100%, and they'll actually go back into a work environment that is known and generally has great equipment, staffed well, and they can somewhat resume activities. There will be some changes they'll notice, but at the same time, they're generally going to be back where they were. Telecommuters, people that will stay home, that have worked from home for a long time, They'll go back to doing what they've always done. But this group in the middle is considered the flex group. And those are the ones that we have to pay attention to the most. Everyone's important. We just have to focus on that flex group a little bit more. Managing a workforce like this that deploys a mix of work from home, on site, and hybrid models can be done correctly. But doing so requires a new way of managing talent. It requires a new way of cultivating culture, and it requires different ways of enabling teams to work together and to work productively. So, for example, onboarding programs in a flex environment will have to be updated. Companies will have to support two workplaces for every employee based on these flex models. So there's definitely a lot more that's happening that we have to be concerned about. So I want to just talk a little bit about the hybrid work models. Hybrid work is certainly here, and it's certainly something that will go forward. We don't know exactly what's going to be the optimal hybrid model. If it's 1 day at the office, 4 days at home, 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, no one quite knows certainly. And like I said in the first slide, is everything will change. But what we do know is on the left there, a majority of leaders say their companies are considering redesigning office spaces for hybrid work. We have a majority of employees in the center that say they want to stay at home and work remotely. But where there's an interesting one is the last graphic there on the right, which says 2/3 of employees want more in-person work or collaboration post-pandemic. Basically, what the way we've interpreted it is that they want to work in both places. They want to work at home part-time, they want to work in an office part-time. And so hybrid and the flex models of hybrid will definitely become very dominant. We know hybrid working provides a lot of benefits to employees. We know it provides a lot of benefits to employers. Always going to be trying to optimize how we get the best balance and the best optimization. But if we do take it a little further here, here's three strategies which I think should be considered. Now, you may or may not agree with me fully or even at all, but after reading a lot of information, conferring with a lot of colleagues, observing what's going on, I think there are several strategies that are going to become important going forward. These three, I think, are going to be very dominant. The move to hybrid work will break the mold, and there will be new and important objectives. We want to make sure the employee has the flexibility to work where and when they want, and even how to a degree. And we want to make sure that we give all of the employees the tools they need so they can contribute from anywhere at any time. So there are some kind of objectives going forward. So these three strategies that I propose is one is design your future workplace, reimagine the workforce experience, and attract and maintain top and diverse talent. Each of those really quickly here. Consideration number one, as you move to your future state of hybrid work, design your future workplace. Companies need to invest in a workplace that supports human performance. It drives safety, it has great technology, and all of it can contribute to these new organizational dynamics. What's important within that workplace is that remote employees should have a designated workspace, one that's properly designed, one that's maintained, one that's kept free of safety hazards and appropriately outfitted with ergonomics in mind. If you listen to some of the previous speakers, there was a lot of conversation about ergonomics, about we should maybe consider stipends, we should outfit people, we should do this, we should do that. There's a lot of great information, but it's imperative that people have a great workspace. And just because they have been working remotely for the past year to year and a half, it doesn't mean that they know how to do so safely moving forward. I want to draw two kind of ideas out here real quick. Um, we have some great data. This data is about, we'll call it 8 months old, but I don't think it's changed much. Employees, we can see from this graphic that a lot of employees have made changes. They've set up an ergonomically sound workstation. They've actually changed their home office chair. They've done a lot of things. Where I'm kind of taken to is the bottom one. 43% of the employees working remotely have taken no action. And this is alarming because we need to take action. If people go back to an office, they generally have the best setup, the best equipment, but working remotely, we sometimes miss the mark. But why do I think this is important? Because other data is telling us that it's becoming problematic. We're seeing that 40% of Americans in a recent survey are seeing new or increased pain in various body parts. We're seeing a similar kind of situation happening in the UK. We're seeing the same kind of situation happening globally. And what we're predicting, what the research is saying, that in the next 12 to 18 months, we will probably see a double-digit increase, 10 to 16% increase in MSDs of remote home working and or returning to a modified workplace. And one thing we're finding is that majority of companies, of employers, they have not carried out a health and safety risk assessment. So we really don't know what we don't know. We don't know where the gaps are. We don't know if people have the right equipment. We know that education is a very important element of making sure people have safety at work, taking breaks and setting up the equipment, teaching them how to use what they have. But it still goes back to the premise, do they have what they need so they can be safe and productive? The second consideration is we have to reimagine the work experience. We have this thing called culture, and culture is really what happens in an organization. It really becomes kind of the way we feel about each other, the way our business acts and operates. And that was built around the way we used to work. And because we're working differently, guess what? We're going to have different culture. So this is an opportunity that culture will result or culture can be designed. So we have to think about how will the employers bring the elements of that culture through the transition, through this hybrid transition? How do we take the good things we like and keep bringing them forward? How do we get rid of the things that were bad pulling down our culture? We understand too that, in a hybrid environment, there's going to be less daily connections. And so we have to figure out how we keep those connections. But what's really important in the culture about reimagining the workforce experience is, it's thoughtfully engaging people into the culture, how we make sure they're part of that community, especially that whole Gen Z group over here that's going to become our primary workforce in a few years. And, there's other considerations here about the workforce experience that may revolve around legal or regulatory issues, but let's just reimagine the core of the workplace culture. We know that not everyone may qualify for hybrid flexible working. There's a lot of factors to consider, but, I think everyone is a candidate to potentially work from home. So even though much depends on the job duties of the employee, we still have some work to do in this area. The other thing too is I do want to draw your attention to what we call blind spots. Not all business leaders and not all employees will embrace the change for hybrid working. While the future of work carries the promise of flexibility, not everyone is on board with this. Leaders must figure out the right model for these different job categories. They must find and figure out the proper roles. They, in the blind spot we're seeing in the right now is that employers are being short-sighted in moving to a flexible model. They're not incorporating employee input into what flexibility should look like. So while that might optimize the short-term benefits, it may come at the risk of employee turnover or a longer-term sustainable problem down the road. So we do have to be aware of these blind spots. The third consideration is we want to make sure we attract and maintain great top and diverse talent. Hybrid, once again, we're able to hire for skill, not just zip code. So the world is our oyster now for hiring. We can look at the skills we need. We can look at candidates we've never considered because they don't have to be within that geographic zip code. And when we start really looking at the talent pool out there, this is going to continue through the next 12 to 18 months. We're seeing trends in data right now to say who's more attractive and who's applying for these jobs. We're finding ergonomists that are now switching roles in marketing because they have a certain skill set. We're seeing great people that were doctors that are now actually getting involved in more project management because of the process-oriented nature of that skill set. So this will continue, but as we kind of come into a close here, I want to just generate a few thoughts. Embrace change. It's coming. Change is coming. More change is happening, and this will continue. Create an environment where employees can thrive safely and efficiently. And as an ergonomist, I would really kind of raise my flag and say it needs to be really with ergonomics. Two is reimagine the workforce experience. So you can actually drive the right culture. You're able to have great processes so everyone can be collaborative and inclusive. Third is find and retain the best talent for your organization. This is definitely a challenge for everyone going forward, but I hope that from a high level, this is helpful to everyone on this call. On that note, I'll kind of turn it back over to Bill Pace if he has any questions that he needs me to answer.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to open up the Q&A session. Jeff, I really appreciate you being so thorough. One of the things that is talked about off and on, but I don't think it gets enough
coverage or focus is truly the retention of employees and the recruitment of key employees, right? Because of experience and the fact that you can do it outside of geography, but so much is spent on lowering absenteeism and claims, and the reality is retention and recruitment are massive in the cost structure, the direct cost structure of organizations. And also, to share with everyone who's still on this call, Jeff was sharing with me in the beginning of the pandemic and COVID, as he was talking to a global financial institution, and the CFO of this Fortune 100 company had asked Jeff, he's like, what's the return on investment for this? And Jeff had said, it's so early on that we really don't have the metrics and the data, but what about just doing the right thing? What about just making sure that you're improving and saving lives? And ultimately there is a return on investment in improving and saving lives. And Jeff, I wanted to reiterate that because I do think that falls in line with recruitment and retention, right? When employees feel like the corporation or the organization values them, they tend to stay longer and they tend to have higher quality of work. So, I think those are pretty important topics to bring up, and I appreciate the fact that you brought up recruitment and retention. Early on, Thomas Neal, you had a question, you had your hand raised. I don't know if it got addressed, but if you could use the Q&A or the chat feature, I know Jeff would be more than happy to address that question. Jeff, were there any maybe metrics or sidebar information that you've looked at along the lines of MSD, MSK for addressing employees working remotely right now?
Bill, thanks. Yeah, there was so much great information during the summit. I hope people participate in, but the continued resonance about finding that work-life balance, taking breaks, making sure you know how to use the equipment that you have. I love some of the conversation there about companies that are providing equipment or letting people get their chair from their office. So I just think there's not one thing I think I can focus on, but there were so many great ideas that came through in those talks that I hope people heard.
Yeah, no, thank you. And one of the things that I would like to take away from this, and hopefully all the participants
Take time to give us their feedback, because we certainly want to learn from this. We certainly want to be thought leaders and practice leaders with our partnership with Marsh, with our partnership with ATI, with our partnership with HEC, Crystal Bauer, all of our hosts and participants, panelists as well, is that geographically we have so many different little pockets of roundtables or groups that get together. And Jeff, is just as you said, with now we can start looking to employ people outside of our standard geography. It almost seems like we could start doing this on a quarterly basis, right? Is creating a roundtable, maybe focusing on one thing and spending some time together, because with Zoom, with web share, we don't have to be in the same area, and we don't have to commute to come to these roundtables. So creating a forum, creating a place for sharing ideas, I think would be really valuable for everyone. So, like the feedback from the participants on that and from everything else. So, again, I really want to thank our partners, Martha, with your consulting group and organization, everyone who's participated along the line, including our UK groups with Champion Health and others. I really appreciate everyone's input in making this a successful summit. Ultimately, with Cardinus, what we're trying to do is create a very comprehensive solution, and not just in the world of office ergonomics, but expanding out to lab, and with our partnership with Marsh and ATI is building an industrial platform as well. So, we can look at global risk and drill down from the forest to the trees. So, ultimately, we're here for you. We're here to be a resource for you, and look forward to addressing any questions or concerns or providing information for you in the future. So, really appreciate everyone's time. Really appreciate everyone giving feedback at the end of this as well. So, we can learn and we can all grow from this. So, Jeff, thank you. Thank you again for bringing your wealth of knowledge and really looking at things outside of the box, things that maybe we hadn't thought about as well. So really key points in there. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.